So, hello everyone, I'm Raj Changadu, and welcome to my sit down with Richard and Brynley Little from Your Land Partner. Guys, welcome, it's good to see you.
Afternoon, Raj.
Hey, Raj.
Hi, guys. I think we only spoke probably about a few months ago, and in the space of a short time, the world has completely changed. Who'd have thought we'd be where we are today? But that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to roll with it, and hopefully, we get some good nuggets of information for the people listening and watching.
We'll do our best.
So, yeah, we'll do what we can. By the way, guys, you are the guinea pigs on this one. This is the first time we've had two guests on from two different locations because of COVID-19. So we're also going to make that work as well. I didn't want to have one of you on without the other. I think the dynamics works better with all three of us. But before we go any further, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us how you got into property, a bit about your journey. Who wants to take that one and start us off?
I'll let Bryn start that one.
Interesting. The third generation leading the second generation. So, yeah, thanks very much, Raj. Thanks for having us on for a discussion. It's always great to discuss relevant topics and add value where we can. But yeah, quick introduction from me, really. So yeah, I'm Brynley Little, as Raj said, co-founder of Your Land Partner, among other property businesses. Being involved in the property industry, I guess from all my life, really, from that perspective. Some would say developments in my DNA. Our family business, if you like, started back in the 1950s with my granddad starting in construction, and through the decades and through the generations, we passed down the reins and passed down responsibility and operations within the various businesses, through to Richard and down to myself as well. And at the moment, we're both kind of co-directors of our companies and running things at the moment. Me myself got over 9 years previous experience within our family contracting business. As a hands-on general building contractor, so I've got experience from actually doing projects, and as my career has gradually evolved and expanded, I've kind of moved from being on site on a day-to-day basis to finding sites, appraising sites, securing sites, raising capital, and working on projects of varying sizes, really.
No, brilliant, brilliant. Richard, do you want to add anything else to that as well?
I'm just a second generation, and I think I'm in my 44th year, or just about to complete my 44th year, apparently. So the only thing I would sort of add to that is that, we've seen a lot of corrections in the market, should we say, quite a few, and we have learnt from our own mistakes over the years. They've been our greatest learnings, and they've been what have allowed us to keep going and propel forward, and probably be relatively well prepared for an unprecedented event, if you like.
No, brilliant, brilliant. That perfectly brings us to where we are right now. So let's just address the elephant in the room, COVID-19. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on how you feel this is impacting us, guys, and maybe some of the pivots and precautions that you guys are putting in place or people should be considering right now.
I'll let Bryn lead every time. That's a refreshing change. So
No problem, no problem.
Yeah, I think obviously, just carrying on from what Richard said just before, it's not something that obviously we got a crystal ball and we knew that was gonna rear its head at some point. Although our experience looking back has always been to build robust foundations to your business to allow for market changes, market movements, changes to the economy, changes to yourselves personally, to individual industries. Obviously, COVID-19 has impacted the world, personally, professionally, economically, across the board. So it's been a really interesting time. It's a difficult time, don't get me wrong, but it's been a really interesting time to take a step back, and reflect, I guess, on what we've been doing up to now, and trying to put things in place that that will have a lasting impact moving forward, and once this pandemic is past the worst, really. For us personally, within our day-to-day operations, we deal a lot with kind of longer play type deals anyway. So it's not necessarily affected our day-to-day, but what it has affected is the supply chain. Obviously, within development and construction, you are dealing with a lot of different professionals within the industry, from the local authority to consultants to funders, across the whole process. So we've found obviously a lot of businesses of varying sizes are affected, whether they're furloughing staff, whether they're suffering from cash flow issues and things like that. And obviously that has a knock-on effect in terms of timelines with regards to our projects. So it's reassessing that, coming up with a plan really of how to move forward. But one of the good things I think it's made us think about more so at the moment, and hopefully others, is how we can improve people's living moving out of this. What can we build? How can we build differently? What processes can we adopt? How can we run our businesses differently that will improve lives of everybody that we deal with? From design of homes to how quickly we can move through the process for some people, to how we structure deals to offer landowners and business owners some solace in difficult times. So it's really interesting for us. It's about looking to the future and seeing what positive impact we can make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, there are some cogs in the wheel that need greasing, and when we fix those systems, they're usually much better for the future. So it kind of helps everyone address their business, and if and when they do come through it, they're in a much better spot. Really, they can move a lot faster because they've really had time to sit down and work on their business instead of in it most of the time.
Absolutely, I think from that point of view, it's almost reviewing what you've done up to now, and almost making a decision to sort of say, do I want to continue along that path? Really, it's a good opportunity for people to divert, to pivot, like you say, in terms of maybe not into a different industry, although that might be some decisions that some people make. Certainly in other industries that are perhaps more affected by the pandemic, but even the types of projects that you're getting involved in, and things like that, really. So I think it's a really good opportunity for people just to stand back, reflect, realign, and go again.
Absolutely. Richard, any other thoughts on this as well?
I guess Bryn's granddad would have always said that you need a good recession or a good downturn he used to say things like get rid of the rubbish, but basically that's probably a little unfair in a sense, because there are some decent businesses that go under in these times, but then you say that and you sort of say this is an ultimate stress test. So we might stress test our deals, our opportunities when we're appraising, etc., and we do this and we do that. But actually, until it happens in reality, that is the stress test of your business model, which is sort of what Bryn is sort of questioning, really, and not just the business model, but actually how good you are at adapting. I think another word I heard Brynley say on an interview or something is being agile. You have to be agile, and you need a little bit of shaking up. You need a little bit of disruption in your business, whoever you are. If you look at any sort of business in any sort of sector, you can get very set in your ways. You get set in you might be striving towards certain targets, certain goals, etc. But you get very set in your ways and set in your processes. So actually, if we look at the positives, it's fantastic, because it actually will shake us up, and it will question exactly what Brynley's saying, and it questions why we're doing it and how we're doing it, in many different ways. So I I could sort of, I relish the unknown. That's something I've always liked. Now, it doesn't mean to say I like the circumstances that cause the unknown, but what it means is the unknown doesn't frighten me. The unknown excites me. Unfortunately, for some people, the unknown is very difficult to live with. But I think in a world where we talk a lot about entrepreneurial stuff and all that, this is where entrepreneurs can thrive. It's harder when things go wrong. It's harder for the dodgy ones to survive. And we know in our business sector and all that sort of thing, there are quite a lot of quite a number of perhaps that people have got sharp business practices, shall we say, or and actually very, very difficult for them to survive through this type of situation. They will get found out, and they can get found out quite quickly. So it's a great time. It's a worrying time on one hand, but on the other hand, it's a great time to look to the future, because we are in for some bad times, is my view. But we also know after the bad times, there'll be some good times, and it's, our business is cyclical. It's not predictable in that sense, but we always know that when we've had some good times, there will be, following those good times, there will be a softer market, a recession, a depression even, and if you haven't been in business, again, we often talk about through one complete cycle. So if you haven't been in the development business sort of since or from before 2008, 2009, so the last 12 years or so, the whole experience of a downturn, some disruption, a softening market is new. If you have been in it before, it doesn't mean to say that you necessarily know how to mitigate some of the risk, because some people never really recovered from the recession from the late noughties. But yeah, it's this is a test for all of us. But most of us will come out stronger. We will. And unfortunately, there will be some casualties. But even those casualties will probably turn it round, and it might take them a few years to get back on their feet, but if they've got it, they will come back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you almost don't want someone to be completely unscathed, and what I mean by that is, if you had money and you were going to invest with someone, they'll become better entrepreneurs because of it at the end of the day, I believe.
When we're looking at, we do a lot of collaboration and partnering and that, and some of the people we partner with, that they haven't necessarily been in this sector, but we want to know they've been battered and bruised somewhere else, because it is feeling the pain that's when you find out, that's when you grow, that's when you find out about yourself, other people find out about you. So yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So you guys were saying, I completely agree. There are going to be some opportunities. Before you thrive, you've got to survive first, of course. But what opportunities do you see coming out of the back of this, after this?
Off you go, Bryn.
Well, if you look back to, say, the previous recession that Richard mentioned, just after that recession were things where there was a real movement from government and from the authorities in terms of things like permitted development rights, office to residential conversions, and basically directives to enable businesses to develop more homes and get the ball rolling again. So I can fully suspect there'll be some changes to legislation from the government perspective to allow house builders and developers to get cracking. And it's often the construction industry, housing industry is one that almost feels the effects of a recession or downturn first in terms of most industries, but it's also one that restarts and refuels the economy again. So I can fully expect something to come out from that perspective. I think in terms of specific kind of targets and specific things to look out for, one of the main things I think that has made us all adapt how we live, actually, not just how we work, but how we live, is the whole social distancing directives that are in place at the moment. Working from home has forcibly become something that businesses are taking on, and employees and employers are having to deal with and equip themselves. So technology is getting better, more stable in terms of connections and facilities and bells and whistles and things like that to enable you to do work remotely. So that begs the question to sort of say, well, will there be a need in the future for large offices? There may still be a need for smaller offices because, you know, you can't substitute that personal connection and getting together and things like that. But certainly large corporates, will they need big offices, people that are employing 200 odd staff or something like that? Will there be a need for that anymore? So large office buildings potentially could be something to look out for as a way of either converting into residential or splitting into further commercial units, something like that. I think there's always going to be an opportunity in and around the affordable end of the sector. It's something that we focus on regardless of economic activity, to be honest. Affordable homes, whether that's socially or locally affordable, are always in need. So it's always our kind of bread and butter, really. We're never too far away from 2 and 3 bedroom family homes that people can afford to live, to buy or to rent. So we can see that continuing. You know, that they're the ones that produce steady returns, not amazing returns in terms of, you know, the some of the things that are promoted that are in lights, you know, big returns and big percentages and big numbers, but they're steady returns because they're consistent and they're robust against market changes. And I think looking at some of the sectors that are going to be really affected and are really affected by this pandemic, prior to this pandemic anyway, some of the businesses within the hospitality and leisure sectors were suffering anyway. If you look at things like pubs has been a dying trade for a long time. Obviously, the good ones will always survive, I think, because there's something, you know, that you know, quite nostalgic about going down to the pub and meeting up with your friends and socialising and things like that. So I don't think it's something that's going to die out completely. But as Richard said, with regards to recessions and getting rid of the rubbish, as my granddad would used to say, it's similar from that perspective. So, you know, what industries are mainly affected by this, apart from aviation, obviously. Not sure we could buy up a few airfields or, you know, Heathrow or something like that. I'm not so sure. But, you know, things like pubs, independent B&Bs and guest houses that aren't run, you know, set up commercially and run as a proper business. They're just maybe a sideline project for people that are, you know, that they're the ones that feel the effect big time by this. And for us, really, it's an interesting one because developers are often, in the public face, developers are often painted as this kind of this figure that all we're interested in is greed and then money and will destroy the countryside, and we want to prey on people's businesses that aren't doing so well, and there are people obviously out there that do that, but for us it's about how assessing how many and what type of person and who we can help in order to improve their lives out of this. So if we can help somebody by purchasing some of their car park of their pub, for example, that will enable them to still operate but still give them some money in their pocket and produce some homes for people to live in, or repurpose a building, or find a piece of land where we can get planning for appropriate new housing. So for us, it's approaching it in the right way, regardless of what kind of specific opportunities there are. I don't know if there's any that spring to mind from your perspective, Richard, but they're the ones off of my top of my head.
I think, yeah, I will touch on the struggling businesses, because I mean we get a lot of those on our desk, either, you know, problem sites or problem businesses, and they're constant. They come all the time, even in the good times. But already, you know, a few weeks, a few months into the pandemic, from the UK's point of view, you know, we've already got quite a lot of stuff, and we don't look at everything that comes on our desk. Now, I think Bryn typically calls them on the edge or over the edge. So it's the businesses and the projects that are teetering on the brink, and they generally, if I'm being honest, they generally go over the edge, because the business owners, if you like, mostly stick their heads in the sand. And when they come to us, a lot of people approach us, oh yeah, we're in trouble now, what can you do? But generally it's, if I'm being frank, it's too late. So they go over the edge. But if we can get involved and refinance, restructure, do something, whatever it is, we will. We've got some stuff on the table at the moment. We just brought somebody out of a couple of deals that they are teetering on the brink, but at least they've got something to be getting on with in the short term. And those that go over the edge, so once it comes into the sort of repossessions, once it comes into first charge receivership or fixed charge receivership, etc., many opportunities there always are, and even more plentiful now. But you've got to have something to bring to the table. You've got to have some cash, or you've got to be able to get hold of some cash, or you've got to have a certain amount of skills to do that. There's going to be plenty of those, but they're not necessarily beginner type projects unless they're partnering with somebody that's been around, and doing it. So plenty of those. But I think the other thing that I'd just touch on is maybe people's motivations with their assets are going to be a little bit different now. Bryn particularly deals with a lot of landowners, me not so much, but a lot of landowners that, they brought some land, or they've got a property, or they've got something, that could be added value. And at the minute they're not motivated because it's for their pension or whatever else. And I think the experience that people are going through now, that's going to tip the balance for some of them. I think we've had 2 that have come to us in the last week or so, people that we've previously spoken to, and it's sort of like, okay, what can we do? We're not out right at this moment. We're not actively going out, sending letters to people, because we feel it's probably not quite right yet, but in another couple of weeks or so we probably will. It's just our own opinion. There's probably a bit of bad taste at the moment, to be fair, but we don't want to appear like vultures, but although some people will probably think we are regardless. So I think there's going to be a massive a change in the motivation of some landowners, and that is ideal for us, and I think anything that lowers the expectation of landowners is a good thing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting what you were both touching on. Like you said, people see it that developers come across like the bad guys sometimes, but like you said, small businesses, you don't know the hurt that a vendor's going through at that time, and no one is forcing them to sell. They sometimes just want to get rid of the headache. They, have been considering this for a while, and all of a sudden they're thankful that someone is there to get them out of it, because if developers weren't able to take it on, they could be still stuck with these businesses or this piece of land that they can't do anything with, and it can sometimes feel like a noose tightening around the neck sometimes, So Brynley touched on it briefly, the types of projects that you guys look for, 2-3 bed houses, affordable housing mostly. Do you work with first time buyers and the Help to Buy scheme? Is that a lot of the area that you guys focus on?
It's certainly part of the marketing. It's part of de-risking a project. So yeah, for us, what it means is whatever the size and nature of the project, it's all about de-risking. So if you work towards more of the affordable rather than the luxury end, it's always going to be less risky. Always. It doesn't matter what the times are. Yes, you're not going to post those, mouth-watering amounts of money that people suggest they make on the, luxury £1 million plus properties. We've been there over the years. We've very rarely made as much out of those as we ever did out of the bread and butter, as Bryn's saying, and that includes in the good times. They are challenging, certainly when you're doing one-offs, but the expensive end of the market, or the more expensive end of the market, and yeah, I'm sure people make great money, but it's so risky, so that's why we sort of stay where we are, and ultimately, we've now sort of pivoted, or pivoting. We're not pivoted yet. We're pivoting from a 100% trading, business, or different businesses over the years, to now probably is going to be more kept than sold. But again, that's there's two reasons for that. Mostly it's good for de-risking, but the second thing is that, you know, it is a generational business, and a lot of what you do is about, you know, the legacy and all that sort of thing. And whilst I would still trade everything if I could, you know, I've got to think and got to listen to Bryn and siblings and stuff, and sort of say, well, actually, what do you want left? You know, don't want to leave you with a headache, but actually, if you want a load of property, well, okay, we'll leave you a load of property, as long as we structure it in a way that's not too, you know, too difficult for anybody. So at the lower end of the market, it's always going to be easier to hang on to those properties. You know, it's going to be easier to refinance, and it's going to be easier to let. You know, so yeah, so certainly, yeah, twos and threes, and predominantly houses and not flats. You know, that's depends where you're operating, I guess, but I think we are going to see more of a move away from flats now. Anybody that's been stuck in a flat for the last 2 or 3 months and still not out there yet, you know, we're very fortunate. We've got a lot of space where we are, a lot of space, you know, and not everybody has. And so we're having a very different experience of lockdown. You know, we're going to be honest with you, I'm enjoying it, you know, largely, you know, you know, but a lot of people aren't. A lot of people, their mental health is going to suffer, and so it's going to have long-lasting implications on the way, as Bryn said, the way that we design homes. You know, and the you know, the yes, it's still going to come down to what's viable. It's got to be commercial, whatever you're doing, but actually a little bit more thought. But of course, you know, if we want to give people a little bit more space, then it either comes at a cost to them, and if they can't afford it, it has to come to a cost to the asset in terms of the land value has to be less. And that's the struggle we'll have over the next few years. But that's one that I'm interested to see how that pans out.
Yeah, there will always be a need for 2 and 3 bed houses, as you said. And yeah, right now I'm sure a lot of people are thinking that dream next car, that upgrade in that car is not as good as that garden they could have right now. It seems to be king, doesn't it, right now? And I think, you know, the good thing that comes out of this is people's priorities completely will change, you know, from what they feel they need to survive and what really gives them the happiness that they're looking for. So I completely agree. What we work on is 2 and 3 bed houses as well, for that very reason, that I find in a 3 bed home, you don't ever have to move, potentially. You know, that's one of those things that you might stay in there forever if you had to, you know, whereas a 1 bedroom flat, as soon as you start getting a family and things like that, it's, you know, you're forced to potentially look elsewhere, and that's something for people to take into consideration, really.
I know Bryn's working on a scheme at the moment where, well, he can tell you a bit more about it, where the design is, yeah, even for the 3 beds, they are going to be extendable relatively easy. You know, we're actually going to build them so structurally so they are relatively easy to extend. So it's exactly what you're saying. If you like an area and you start at a 3, well, you can extend it to a 4 or even a 5 potentially. You know, that's certainly something high on your list, Bryn, isn't it?
It's about looking at it from a long-term perspective. You know, when looking at things like build costs, we often do things like life cycle costing, but do we look at it from a design point of view? Obviously, local authorities have certain things that you have to meet in terms of lifetime homes, but that's more from a perspective of level access and things like that, so you can stay in the same property. But from a design aspect, what we're looking at, and we're implementing it in as many of the house types as possible, is to allow for easy expansion, whether that be up into the roof, or whether it be over a garage, or whether it be out to the back, or whatever that may be for that person. Because then it's you know, we're putting some relatively easy structural not changes, but we're thinking about it when you can think about it and implement it to make it as easy as possible, and it becomes a selling point for families. You know, you want to get on the ladder as a starter home in a 2 bed, but if you could go up into the loft because the windows and the trimmers and the stairs and everything are in the right place, that you can quite simply and quite affordably knock into the roof and create a third bedroom, or free to afford, then that's the kind of approach that we're taking at the moment. But everything centres around enabling people to live better. And I think this whole situation, it's really interesting because it certainly highlights and magnifies what's important to people. As you said, Raj, you know, people longing for outside space and a space of their own just to, you know, relax in, if you like. Your house and your home has become your sanctuary. And I think people, when you can go here, there and everywhere, almost take that for granted, and take the convenience aspect of you know, what we do in our day-to-day lives for granted. So I think with a lot of that taken away at the moment, it has highlighted what really is important to people and what people are longing for. You know, if you're longing for you know, making changes at home to enable your home to be better, then that's high on your list of values. But you know, as soon as, for example, lockdown is lifted slightly, and I don't know, DIY shops are open, who's flocking to the DIY shops? As soon as the pub opens, who's flocking to the pub? As soon as, you know, KFC and McDonald's are opening their drive-throughs, and it's creating queues of a mile long. And what does it say about those people? It says that is so high on their priority list that they will do anything and everything to get that. So for us, it's about sitting back, observing people's behaviour, buyers, occupiers of property, to understand what really is important to them, not what they say is important to them when things are rosy. It's what's really important to them as baseline kind of hierarchy of needs, and then putting a few things on top of that will enable them to enjoy the kind of finer details.
No, absolutely. I think that's really important what you guys have just touched on there, and it's very interesting how you're looking at your builds and trying to forward think about what people might do with them in the future and kind of put those provisions in early. That just seems to make sense, you know, that people again will be forced to not have to move if they don't want to, really. If they really like their area, do they have to go for the buying and selling costs and go for the solicitors? I mean, everyone hates moving as it is, don't they? So that really seems to be something that could add a lot of value to them by thinking that way and looking at a design from that approach. I think that's really interesting.
Why do people move? That's the question I would sort of pose to everybody. Really, well, what's the reason people move? It's generally because their family's getting bigger and they're outgrowing their current property. They either move because they're moving for a career or a job. They're potentially moving from rented to purchasing a property, and they might have to move out of area because things aren't affordable. Or alternatively, people are perhaps even making the move because they've found their dream house. I mean, I can't really think of many others, you know, obviously health reasons and things like that, but there's either a desire or a need. And if you can service that need by forward planning as much as possible, generally speaking, the only reason people will then move is because they want to move. And I think that's massively different.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, once you've got kids in school, well, that becomes a lot more difficult, doesn't it? You've got your area zones where kids have the catchment areas, that's the word I'm looking for, where once you're in it, you don't want to move from it. Now, if you can extend to your house, that kind of takes that decision away. It makes it an easier decision, really, for people. So I think, like you said, there are really only a handful of options and decisions as to why you might move. And if you can alleviate some of those, then that's going to make your units that much more valuable, really.
I'm not sure how many people will actually work from home. I don't know what the difference in numbers is, but we've flirted with it for a long, long time. You know, for all the years I've been in it. You know, since technology, and before the technology we've got now, I do think there will be a substantial amount of people that will end up working from home. So I think that will actually change the demand in certain areas. So I think it will change. It will probably, for some people, move the demand more to perhaps more rural or more outskirts of urban, more spacious urban sort of places. And I think that's where we probably, whether it will go against what a lot of people do want to do, but that's where we probably do need to actually expand and loosen the planning to the opposite of what we've been doing, actually open it up. So there is more green belt, etc., allowed, because if we can give people more space in some of the projects we're working on, so I think the biggest site we've got is 20 acres or so. Well, you can fit 250, 300 houses on 20 acres, but actually we don't want to do that. It would be nice to get 80 or 100 on there and have a lot more open space and grid. So you're giving each plot slightly more space, which will add to the community. So it will make it a lot easier to actually extend and want to stay there. But the one thing I want to touch on working from home is, again, we're very fortunate. We've got rooms that we can go in and set up temporary offices or whatever, but most people haven't. So everybody that might want to be working from home or is having to work from home at the moment, they're having to perch on the edge of the bed or on the dining room table if they've got a dining room. That's hard for some people. So we need to start thinking in terms of design, more flexible space, so we need to incorporate all of those things as well. And I think this is in my lifetime, this is the biggest opportunity to change how we build and what we build. And I do think just to finish on that bit is the driver will be the government. Now, that isn't what people want to hear, but they'll give us the means to do that. And I think they will financially. And there's lots of grant money out there, nothing to do with COVID, just normal grant money in terms of, different solutions, high-tech solutions, et cetera, et cetera. Those people that understand what's out there, and the entrepreneurs, let's give the entrepreneurs the sort of room and the support that they need to go and develop some of this stuff. It's amazing what we've seen. Things that wouldn't have got developed or made in certain factories, how quick they can adapt. But they've only done it because they had to. They haven't done it through choice. So sometimes we have to be told to do something to make us actually do it. Otherwise, we'll sit on the fence forever. Sorry, that's a bit of a soapbox thing there, but
no. It's all variable at the end of the day. I completely agree. Like you said, that we will keep doing the same things unless someone forces us to change. At the end of the day, and then it becomes tone deaf in the wrong time. There's no one right now. Everyone wants masks. No one wants Dyson vacuum cleaners right now. He had to be doing those ventilators at the time and things like that. So those things just make sense. Like you said, we adapt to what the government allow us and push us to do.
Yeah, what I see and what I get frustrated by is the naysayers, if you like, and I'll get into that, conspiracist and all that sort of stuff. Doesn't matter what they say, what they do, ain't going to change anything. So it's the people that embrace what we're being told and allowed to do. They're the people that will change things. I'll use the entrepreneur thing again, but it is the true entrepreneur that says, well, look, in an ideal world, this wouldn't be happening, but it is. What can we do with it? How can we change?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's the next thing? I'm sure there is going to be a few things on the horizon. The high street is completely changing, so who knows what's going to happen there. I don't know actually what your thought. If you guys have got any thoughts on that from that point of view, the high streets and where you think that might go.
I think we have, Brent, haven't we?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, obviously, because it's one of those, like I said earlier, about say the pub trade, for example. The high street has been in decline for a long time, and as up to now, nobody's really kind of taken the bull by the horns and come up with anything that's not just conceptual but is deliverable as well, in terms of repurposing. And regenerating town centres. Obviously, a lot of the contributions to the decline of the high street really is, firstly, the kind of edge of edge of town retail parks, things like that, and then obviously the emergence of online online shopping and Amazon and places like that. I think that personally that the high street is going to become more of a community type feel, in the respect of it's going to have more of a mixed use feel. So bringing residential into town centres and high streets, bringing a lot of possibly depending on where you are, obviously, co-living, co-working type spaces, pop-up transient tenancies where you've got small entrepreneurs, small business owners that perhaps have got a little boutique offerings and things like that. So I think it's going to become much more of a personal space, and I think to enable that to happen, then like Richard said, it's got to come from the top down. Really, it's got to come from government direction in terms of what you can and can't do. But it's also then got to come, if people really want the high street to evolve and change and to remain effectively, it's still going to be there, it's just going to be different, then people have got to be told, and not kind of make it up for themselves, really. So taking some of the big places, the big buildings in town centres, and splitting them into smaller, co-working, as I said, perhaps a mixture of co-working and co-living. But yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think co-work and co-living is something that I think will really start to take off more and more in the high street areas, if they want them to thrive again. At the end of the day, this pandemic is going to really affect a lot of small businesses, and we would love to keep them around, and hopefully they do. And like you said, and can we just bring more residents potentially into that area that makes it more community, really, and more vibrant from that point of view.
I think the thing to pick up on as well is that what as I said, what's contributed to the demise of the high street is perhaps those that are occupying a high street location. Are they adapting? Are they pivoting? Are they evolving with the times? One of the major things that, in terms of retail parks and online shopping, is convenience. Fair enough, high street locations don't necessarily offer convenience, but they offer experience that perhaps you might not be able to get anywhere else. So I think for businesses that do remain in the high street, regardless of what kind of industry, whether it's clothing or technology or whatever it is, it's how can they improve the customer experience? Because if you take something away and you put it online and you put it convenient that it gets dropped off at your door, that's a big tick in a lot of people's boxes, but it will never fulfill that desire for people to get out and go and have a pleasurable experience doing something, So for me, it's about the town centres and high streets becoming more of an experience, if that makes sense. So you go there and you can experience lots of different things, within an hour or 2 hours of going there, meeting up with people, bars, restaurants, and that will always sort of, I think, thrive if you can get the footfall. And so for me, it's what can we do to improve experience of people.
Yeah, experience is exactly what a lot of people want from their high street. I mean, my wife always says to me, like, why do you go out for a £4 coffee when you can just have one at home? But it's not the coffee. It's the whole experience that comes with it. And that's what I'm paying for, and that's what I value. And I think that's it. People value those experiences, however they evolve and adapt. That's where people spend their money, because they enjoy the experiences. I agree. I'm going to completely segue here and move on to another topic, if that's okay. And I want to talk about the development appraisals, right? Different developers look at these in different ways. Some might have a few items on their list. Some might have a page. Some might have 5 pages. what are some of the items that you see missed off a development appraisal that are extremely important? You know, everyone has, you know, your third, a third, a third. I know that's an old way of looking at it, but everyone has your purchase cost, everyone has your build cost, whatever that might be, and people have your profit. But there are a load of other fees and micro payments in there as well. What are some of the things that you see missed off time and time again?
We will see a lot of the surveys, reports, investigations don't get priced in, you know, and I mean, I don't know what the number would be, but I mean, we in the last couple of weeks, I think we commissioned landscape report, probably about 12 grand, Bryn, something like that. I think, I can't remember what it was now. You might remember better than me, you know, and those didn't even exist a few years ago. You know, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have them. Well, I am really, but that wouldn't be very popular. You know, I see any, but people just have no idea the amount of fees that are involved. You know, prior to getting on site, prior to getting permission for the first thing, but then prior to getting on site, you know, we happen to invest an awful lot of money, you know, in the early stages of planning to you know, give ourselves a lot more chance. But yeah, and another thing that crops up, certainly when you get to doing a little bit larger project, if you've got a road on there, for instance, things like bonds. You know, you might have to, you know, you might have to comply with a bond or supply a bond for the local authority in respect of is that effectively insurance policy really, is that road going to last? And if not, you know, so we've got one on site at the moment where their estimation of the cost was something like 120 grand. So they're looking for a bond of 120 grand. So there's two ways of doing it. You either buy a bond, or you put 120 grand in an escrow or similar account for the next, however many years you can negotiate. Yeah, and I rarely see that on there. It doesn't always apply, but it applies a lot more now than it used to. And on the subject of bonds, it's also things like performance bonds, you know, and payment bonds. So effectively, you know, if you're hiring a main contractor, you know, how do we know that they're going to deliver? Well, we might ask them for a performance bond, you know, in case they go bust or anything like that. Well, that's a cost to that. You know, we don't always do that, but they're things that don't even get spoken about. You know, so yeah, any number of surveys and things like that. Project management cost is also another one that people underestimate, and they don't really know whether I've seen people try and get money out of the development funders by charging some sort of development management cost or project management cost to themselves, and I see people suggest that you can do this, and I wouldn't say you can never do it, but it's very rare that you can get away with that from a development funder, because, you know, unless you're actually project managing and drawing a proper fee, you know, so there are some things that get added that shouldn't be in there, I guess, but project management costs are always underestimated in my view. And then once we go beyond fees, professional fees, the big one that I'll just then let Bryn have a go is affordable housing. So developer contributions, but specifically affordable housing. I'll let Bryn do the other developer contributions. People just don't get it. A lot of people steer clear of projects of that size, but they don't understand the implications. So they either go on the basis that, they'll always get 75 or 80% of the value for all the properties that they provide for affordable housing, in which case in many areas they're going to be really, really wrong, because some areas, you know, we're lucky to get 50%. You know, so that they'll do that, or so they'll either put it in at the wrong amount, or they won't put it in at all. Like, you know, that obviously is the wrong amount. But we like to talk to people that are doing projects, prepared to do projects that have affordable housing in them. So, you know, typically 10 units and above, if you like, because there's a lot more opportunities in that part, those size projects, than there is in the you know, less than 10. So less competition, etc. So so it either gets left off or completely wrong in the numbers. But I'll let Bryn do some of the other developer contributions that they get wrong, like the CIL, etc.
Yeah, I think for me, it's not necessarily what people leave off; it's what people completely underestimate. To be honest, because and that's not just from a developer's perspective. That's also from people like surveyors as well, land agents, people like that. When you're dealing with a landowner that might have a land agent or a go-to surveyor that's working on behalf of them, and you're trying to kind of negotiate a deal, and you come up with what you consider to be realistic costs, based on what you've done before, versus basically somebody that says they're justified costs, but they've basically just gone to their kind of book of it's going to cost an X amount percentage of the build cost or what have you. The thing to realise is each project is different. Obviously, that there is a range of figures. So what we see, probably the main mistake people leave off, is they only have one column of numbers for each line item within your appraisal, because it's there are no fixed costs really in the process. So we have a range. So we might say, well, the road, for example, might cost 120,000, or it might cost 165,000. And on the face of it, 35,000 when you start totaling up all of your costs might be relatively low, but it's 35 grand. I'd rather have 35 grand work in our favour than work against us. So that's one of the main things. It's people overdoing it, certainly, in terms of their numbers, undercooking costs and overdoing the gross development value. But in terms of contributions, a lot of people leave off CIL. They either leave it off, so Community Infrastructure Levy, which obviously the government attempting, if you like, to bring in to try and simplify how they collect developer contributions in different areas. It's not particularly simple, certainly if you're working in different areas, because some local authorities adopt 2 levels of CIL, some don't adopt any, some have CIL and 106 payments for things like education and open space and trees and public art and all these different things. So each local authority, collects payments differently, which makes it, not particularly easy to work through. But one of the things related specifically to CIL, specifically when talking about CIL as a contribution, where I see a lot of people go wrong is that obviously it's a £1 per square metre cost that you can find out from your local authority website. But where a lot of people either they don't even know it's in place firstly, or they go on their local authority website, they see a number and they don't realise that number then needs a further indexation to bring it up to date. So a lot of the figures are published maybe from 2012, I think a lot of them are published by, and then there's a calculation or an equation that you have to do to bring it up to its relevant number now, or not even now, because obviously it's if you're appraising a project, that project might not go forward and might not go into planning and get consented for another 12 or 18 months. So then you've got to project that figure as well slightly. So as an example, it might be £40 a square metre, but there might be an indexation charge of 49.4% or something, so best part of 50%. So then that's actually a £60 per metre charge, and you've allowed £40. So it could be quite a discrepancy there as well. It's appraisals is something that we work on day in, day out. It's the most important part of the entire development process, because that's where you're going to work out which are the viable projects to move forward with, really. So it's an area where people should not overlook. It's an area where we see a lot of people want to overlook or try and expedite it to secure a project as quickly as possible. But time spent in the appraisal is a little bit like the phrase of, if you've got six hours to cut down a tree, spend 4 hours sharpening your axe. So if you're looking for a project, spend more time in the appraisal than any other acquisition operation to actually get it on your desk.
No, I think that's a great analogy, by the way, about cutting down the tree. It's so true. The appraisal is so important that I think people, that's why I wanted to talk about it, because you hit the nail on the head. Some people miss things. Some people don't understand certain things. I mean, anyone new to development might not even know that there are these contributions that you have to pay to the council sometimes in the form of SIL or S106 or affordable housing. And that just brings me to the fact that that's how important your power team are. They will be able to guide you on this and help you. If you're not sure what the index is and where to find it, and even know what the cost per square metre is for the SIL, then speak to your architect, speak to your planning consultant. They should be able to help you with the most up-to-date details. But obviously, again, don't just have one line for each item, say, okay, I think it's going to be this and that's what it's going to be. Do a second one, do a B, do a C, because the more you get on that piece of paper, on that appraisal at the start, the less you're going to be caught off guard as you go forward throughout the project, really. And just moving on from that, one of the other things I just wanted to touch on from the appraisal is contingency costs and how people look at that. Like you said, for everything you miss off the list, if you don't have enough contingency fund there, then that gets wiped out, that gets eaten into. I mean, even if you have done a project time and time again, say 20 houses, and you're doing another 20 houses in the same area, you'll have a good handle on the costs, but the planning conditions can be completely different because it's a year down the line. You might have renewable energy, and now you've got to put solar panels on every single house, which you didn't factor into because you didn't have to do it before. So those are some of the things that, even if you've done a project before, it doesn't mean that you can cut down on your contingency funds. How do you guys approach that? Do you just put a percentage of the build costs, or do you assess every project on its individual merit, basically?
Well, we start off with just a percentage on the build costs, but generally the ranges of numbers that we produce, they are the unknowns. They are the risk. That's where your contingency gets eaten up. So typically on a new build, once we've got a good idea what the ground conditions are, as I said before, we spend quite a lot of money on early stage ground investigation, etc., way earlier than most developers, even in the planning process, because a lot of the stuff, as Bryn said, we do a longer term plan in place. So we obviously want to mitigate the risk against getting refused. So we supply a lot of this stuff. So so typically on a new build site, when we're looking at reasonable conditions, then we're on a 5% contingency max. And you could be as low as 3%. Certainly, some of the valuers, they're some of the software that they use just automatically it throws up 3%. Now, it's really how strong your other numbers are. It's not really what your contingency there. I mean, we always sort of say contingency is profit. That contingency is profit, but obviously funders want to see contingency in there, etc., and we want some in there anyway. But it's not there to be spent. It is there to trickle down to the bottom line. Invariably, most don't. They'll spend their contingency and a lot more. So it depends how tight your numbers are, how solid they are, how much you know about it. One of the reasons we like new build over conversions, in many cases, we know much more about what our costs are going to be, more predictable on new build than they are on conversions. Once we've had a good look at the ground. And once we've done that, then we've got a much better idea. So, I mean, to the point where if we were looking at a listed building conversion or whatever, we would probably, even ourselves, we'd be in the 25, 30, 40% contingency, because we've been there before and we know, don't matter how many times you've been there before, it's flipping going to cost a lot more than you think it is. So, so we're, to say, again, it comes back down to the purpose of the appraisal. Is the appraisal something you're going to be sharing? Most of our appraisal stuff we share with the stakeholders, and it's pretty open, but you're not necessarily going to share it too early. But if we're in negotiations with a valuer, for instance, we use their numbers, not our numbers. We just off air compare our numbers to what we think they're going to be, and because it's a battle, if you try and bring your numbers into their default settings, if you like, you just won't get it. So Bryn mentioned previously about some of the sort of challenges that you have with surveyors, and so contingency is one of them. To say, I think the last few that we've done where we've been talking to valuers and land agents, etc., I think 3% is pretty much the norm now, Bryn, isn't it?
Yeah, seems to be.
And that's a ridiculously low figure. I'm sure you would agree, Raj.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree that once you don't want to use your contingency fund, but once you do, you're really, I mean, if you didn't put that 3 or 5% on there, well, that 3 or 5% would go on your profit line. But people end up really, if they eat into their contingency, well, then you're really eating into your profit line after that. Guys, I'm going to be mindful of your time. We've got a few more questions left. I'm going to move on now and talk about just some of the lessons that you guys would have picked up and learned along the way. You come from 3 generations of developers, as you mentioned. What does a generational developer know that a newbie doesn't? I know we've touched on a few of those things already, but are there any hard lessons that you think that you guys learn, or you think people will learn if they haven't been through a few cycles, really?
I'll kick that one off. We're perhaps to and fro on this one, but one of the biggest for me is if you're mostly trading. So this does depend on what your exits are, but if you're mostly trading, get out before the cycle reaches its peak. Now, as nobody knows when it's reaching its peak, don't hang in too long. Basically is when you think that actually, like, over the last few years we've had, Brexit's sort of come and nearly gone. I'm not quite sure where we are with that now, but that's on it, and that's contaminated the whole picture. Regardless of what your politics are, we know that was always going to cause an economic situation, and so we would say we've got 2 projects on site now, but before they went on site, they were on pause for a while because was it the right time, wasn't it the right time? So one of the big lessons is knowing when to start and when to pause a project if things change mid through, and not being afraid to actually stop it. Much better to stop and effectively mothball a project if you can earlier in the process, the better. But don't be afraid to do it, and that follows through that you have to have all the stakeholders on board in order to do that. But just because you started a project, so this is the big one for me, just because you started one doesn't mean to say you've got to carry on regardless. Whether you're holding £100,000 worth of debt or £10 million worth of debt, it's obviously the amount of debt's important, but don't be afraid, providing you can get the stakeholders on board to say, look, we need to pause this for 3 months. Let's wait and see what the end values are going to be, or slow down or whatever. So I think the big one is like, right, okay, look, let's take a collective decision, and also constantly review as well. So I'll hand that one back to you, Raj.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely important. Like you said, that's most people believe when you start a project, well, that's it, I've started, I have to finish. But at the end of the day, you normally, well, you have to go into more debt before you get out of it. And can you service that debt at a lower level? Is it better to wait, like you said, a few months? Because the worst place to be is finish units sat there with the max amount of debt, potentially, council tax, development funding, service charges, all these things, they all start mounting up then. And if you finish at the wrong time, that's what you got to contend with. So I think that's a great bit of feedback and a bit of knowledge for everyone. Brynley, did you have any other thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I think for me, obviously, from my point of view, I've had the benefit of learning directly from 2 generations above me, and it's obviously as a kind of the younger generation that's kind of almost tasked with taking things forward. It's important to look at how you can evolve in terms of your business to stay relevant. But for me, it is vitally important to maintain those solid foundations and that anchor yourself in the past, because that's what works. So it's approaching building the business with a long-term view. development is that kind of industry that if you approach the business with a short-term gains perspective, get rich quick, get in, get a deal, make a few £100,000 as quickly as possible, then the chances are you're going to lose out at the end of the day. So for me, it's developing that kind of mindset of this is a long-term business. So if you're not necessarily seeing the fruits of your labour straight away, and when I say straight away within this industry, I'm talking it might take a year or 2 years of groundworks to then really start to see things emerging. And it's backing yourself and really sticking to that process, because at times it can get incredibly difficult and you do doubt yourself that, you know, this project will come good or come off, or we are gonna, you know, we're working so hard but we're not necessarily seeing any profit at the moment because we've got to sell the units and that's not going to be for another 2 years. So that's an interesting mind shift that you've got to develop yourself. So it's finding a balance between looking how to, you know, stay relevant in the current world, but also anchoring yourself to the ground in terms of what works and what has worked previously, because those solid foundations will never change.
No, that's brilliant. And just following on from that, it seems like you said, it's a slow burner. Patience, it seems absolutely key from that perspective. Don't be too impatient to make a quick buck. At the end of the day, like you said, the longer you stay in this game, the more chance you're going to give yourself of you will get there if you do all the right things and don't try and rush it at the end of the day.
That, Raj, is don't overstretch and it's cash flow. So, yeah. You know, and I think we hear the term leverage all the while, and there can be some great leverage, but most leverage I see is bad leverage. So it's bad leverage equals overexposure, basically, and you've got to have cash, and that's not just in the changing time, should we say, and because cash flow kills the projects, and the biggest thing is people don't fund their business. You fund the business, then you fund the project. If you can't fund the business is drain on the project. So actually can turn a good project, and we see this quite a bit with newer developers and scaling developers, where the project actually is fine, but they've drained the project because they're not sufficiently capitalized for their business. And that's the massive thing. And that doesn't, to me, that doesn't really make any difference whether you're going from one project to another and you're doing a, you know, I don't know, a little flip, or you're doing a HMO conversion, or you're doing, you know, 60 unit new builds or whatever. Principle's still the same. You need to have cash. You know, otherwise you'll also spend an inordinate amount of time trying to raise cash. And it's hard to raise cash from somebody when actually the figures aren't quite right, because, you know, you're having to fudge the figures. And we see this, we feed fudge figures all the time, sort of showing a return. Well, actually, why are you suddenly mid-project trying to get another 20 grand? 50 grand, 200 grand, and we get it all the time. And, you know, we're not stupid, you know, we're not the smartest people in the world, but we're not stupid. So cash is so important. And when you get a bit of a downturn, you've got a bit of a cash pot, you know, then, you know, so don't over leverage your cash. Don't have every pound out, you know, that you can. Just keep some there. It's we talked about contingency, you know, this is business contingency, and that's having cash.
No, that's so important, actually, that you touched on that. Your project isn't your whole business at the end of the day. That's one element. It's just one project. That's exactly what it is. And you've got to have cash in both, or access to cash in both, really, at the end of the day. Else, like you said, all your cash could be out and you could grind to a halt. You can't pick up any more deals. You can't ride anything out because everything's in that. So I think that's really important what you guys have touched on there. Kind of following on from that, we have pretty much answered it, is behaviours and habits. You know, are there certain behaviours and habits that you see in successful developers, things that you've adopted, things that you've seen in other people, and what might they be? Just some habits.
Do you want to kick off, Bryn?
Yeah, I think successful habits for me, what it takes to be a successful developer is those that see it as their primary their primary business, their primary thing that they're thinking about. It's not something on the side. It takes their full focus. So focus is one. You've got to be incredibly persistent. You will come up against many knockbacks, and it's about working your way through that. It's about developing absolute clarity on why you're doing what you're doing. So why you're involved in the industry, firstly, why you're creating, the types of properties that you are creating, and having absolute clarity of that, because I think if you lose sight of the reason why you're involved in any business or any industry that you're involved in, it can be, you can very quickly become lost, and that takes the enjoyment out of everything. And so I think that's the key, really. This is a slow burn business, right? So if you're only interested or involved in development for the profit that it's involved in, you will fail. So you have to enjoy the process. You have to enjoy and find something that you love about the process that keeps you going, because that process can take 2 years. There's no point spending a miserable 2 years chasing something, because in most cases you'll never find it.
No, that kind of brings up Steve Jobs' line or quote where he says most people, if you don't love it and you don't enjoy it, you'll quit, because most people are sane, right? If you don't enjoy some part of it, you won't persist. And I think persistence is one that I've actually heard before. I think we've had Evan Maindonald came on before, and he said persistence was key for him. Richard, did you have any other ones that you could think of to add to that?
We say we covered a lot, leverage, cash, etc. Yeah. But I think is people don't have a balanced team. There's a real problem here, and we talk about core team and key players, etc. But they're, even in a partnership, in fact, sometimes more so in a partnership, it's not balanced, and when there are, Bryn and I, we have different opinions on many things, so, and that you get an impasse. Then it's a case of, well, okay, ultimately who's going to make the decision? So you've got to have one clear decision maker firstly, but they've got to be prepared to listen. And they need a balanced team around them. So I think, so what we see is again, it's not just new developers, it's scaling developers and people that have just been successful before, perhaps haven't had a hit. They do start believing so much in themselves. I mean, Evan, who we know quite well, we a conversation about this sort of thing, and it's a case of, right, look, whoever good, I've been doing it nearly 44 years. I don't say I learn everything every day, I probably don't, but I learn stuff from people that have been doing it 44 days or 44 months or whatever, but only because I listen. And a lot that go under, they don't listen. They follow in a path. They're following a person. They might look up to a person or whatever, but they're often following a single person, the single point of failure, if you like. So if the CEO or the founder or whatever you want to call them, if they don't have a team around them, and by balance, I mean people that will challenge them. We get on quite well with people that are probably a lot heavier hitters than we are, and that's principally because if we don't agree with them, we will say so, and they respect that. But we go there and we have those discussions with people. We've got no agenda, So what we do find is people believe they have a good team around them, but they're not clear on the team members' agendas. So it's so important to get that balance. So when I particularly do more of this than Bryn, is the project rescue type stuff, and you talk to people, and there nearly always is, it's one person, and often that they've never talked about, they start talking to me like a counsellor, really. They don't have people to talk to, and occasionally it's to have a business partner, but a lot of their emotional issues come from the business partnership, not because they're not getting on necessarily, but you can't help sometimes offloading one person's problems onto another, and then it becomes, instead of the project or the business, we're talking about the problems of the particular partner that has with the business. So you spend a lot of your time on that. So having balance, finding that balance, and it comes and goes as well. Let's not pretend you get to the point and everything's great and it is forever on. People move on, people change, the same people we'll have, I don't know, sort of key people for us, our lawyers, etc. Well, dozens we've had, and some of them have been pretty good, but eventually, we change or they change. We get too used to each other. So also be wary of long-term relationships. People think that's the holy grail, and I'm not saying we all strive for it, but I've seen some very one-sided long-term relationships that people don't realise are one-sided.
No, I think that's some great feedback, guys, and thoughts on that. And I completely agree with certain relationships. They can get stale from that point of view, and you've got to keep talking. I think communication is absolutely key from that point of view, isn't it, really? And ask the questions that you need to ask. If you can't do that, then you're going to struggle from that point of view, really. Guys, just a couple more questions. Last couple, very quick ones. You talked about balance just briefly. As entrepreneurs, as business owners and developers, there comes a lot of stress and pressure with that. I'm yet to find someone who can go on holiday, lay on the beach, and their mind isn't on their business in some shape or form at some level. Are there any routines you guys have to help de-stress, reset, relax, or stay focused, really? Is there anything that you guys do from that point of view? Maybe even exercise or meditate? Anything you can share?
I'm going to have to let Bryn start that one as well.
I wonder why. I've grown up watching my granddad, or mainly my dad, really, work a lot of hours, and that's purely because he loves what he does. I always remember my granddad saying that a change is as good as a rest. So just changing, and a change in my view from witnessing what my dad's been doing over the years is that a change is working on a different project rather than going and doing something different. It's working on a different project because you're changing what you're looking at, and that invigorates him looking from the outside in. But for me personally, I'm always, entrepreneurs do, they're always switched on. They're never too far from being switched on, should we say. Whether that's waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and, spending 2 hours, 3 hours on your notes on your phone, writing loads of ideas down or something, which I've done I do regularly, to be fair. But for me, I find it relatively easy to switch off. I really do value that balance between being on in terms of on the business, but then also being focused on and being present with family. I've got a young son, 5 months old. So for me, it's about being present in the moment, enjoying those things. I wouldn't say it's particularly relaxing. It's quite, it's a bit like development, really. It takes a lot of patience. It's a steep learning curve, but that's a solace away from some of the difficulties within business. You really do connect. For me personally, I really do connect in with the reason why I do what I do, just by spending time with him and spending time with my wife. But from a personal perspective, in terms of fulfilling my kind of need of things, I'm a keen runner, so I try and get out running 4 or 5 times a week if I can. I haven't for a while actually at the moment, since kind of lockdown and stuff, but trying to get out, trying to kind of sharp body, sharp mind sort of perspective. I also just like switching off, watching some TV, watching Netflix or a film or something, just to take you away from some of the things that you're thinking about. I struggle with things like meditation and stuff. My wife's a yoga instructor, so yeah, she runs her own yoga business. I don't do yoga myself, so I really do struggle with that kind of Zen kind of approach to things. So for me, it's like trying to do some of the other things that I love doing, really, like watching cricket, playing cricket, going running, or potentially, doing some projects, doing some home projects, DIY, getting out in the garden, just doing something.
No, brilliant. Thanks for that, Bryn. Richard, anything that you might add to that from your point of view?
Yeah, somewhat the opposite, really. So, from Bryn's perspective, is taking advantage of the fact that my daughter-in-law is a yoga teacher. So, yeah, we do yoga. I do yoga. My wife does yoga, and my own version of meditation, which so you do quite a bit of that breathing, and well, obviously we all breathe, but I think you might know what I mean. Yeah. But actually, and I find that very fulfilling. But actually, from a stress point of view or pressure point of view, one thing I've learned very recently is that nobody thinks they get stressed. I prefer to sort of say pressure. I used to lead a very, very busy life, traveling life in London a couple of times a month, and once a month in Spain. For 4 or 5 months a year in Spain, or on and off, so commuting. So a lot of traveling, and I realised that just the sheer pressure. I've only realised by not doing it. I realised just the pressure, just by I've got a train at 5:36 in the morning. How am I going to get to the station? Blah blah. So stopping that is realised that actually, I probably was under more pressure than I thought. But generally, I'm quite an even sort of person. I don't really celebrate. Bryn would tell you, okay, something's great. Yeah, okay, right, move on. So that's a bad thing sometimes, but the flip side of that is things don't bother me. So over the years, and I've got that from his granddad, and Bryn will agree that his granddad's probably the most content person that I've ever known. I've never met the Dalai Lama, but I guess he's, nothing would think, over the years, the only thing that's ever bothered him, it's only ever bothered me, is when there's issues with the kids or the wider family. That's it. No business, and don't lose sleep. Just, so I'm a very sort of, I don't celebrate the highs, but I don't get fed up with those. Mostly it's a case of, I box it off, if you like. It's sort of like, yeah, that's nice. Yeah, get that one out of the way. Right, I'll move on to that, because there's always something next. And because there's always something next, whether you've got a good thing or a bad thing you're dealing with, there's always something next. It's a bit like COVID-19. There's always something next. Tough times for some people. Look, I'm not going to pretend we don't have some. We've had some, had too much firefighting, but we've still had some, decisions to make, and obviously looking at all, constantly reviewing, etc. So yeah. Somebody did ask the other week, how much money have you lost through COVID? No idea, because there's no point counting it, because it's only paper money, isn't it? We might have lost £2 million off of a site value. We don't know yet anyway, so how do you count it? But that money's not actually existing until it's crystallized. So don't get too too excited about victories, and don't get too down by disasters. And I do see there's a massive promotion for people to really celebrate the wins. And my own experience over the years is the people that do that are also the people that really, really suffer when things are against them. And I would imagine anybody watching this or listening to this can just think of somebody. It might be yourself, but think of somebody that applies to. So, give yourself a moment, pat on the back, fine. But to go over the top, much more, much more spiritual, I suppose, as you get older as well. And age does a thing. I've been frustrated many times in the past, but still didn't lose any sleep. And that's one of the things I talk to people, whether it's consultancy, partnering, or whatever. I want to know what keeps them awake, because they're the things that we shouldn't be doing. They're the things that we need to make sure that we make them feel comfortable about it. Because if you lose sleep, something wrong somewhere, something really fundamentally wrong, and sometimes people can't sleep because they're just buzzing with ideas. I can live with that, but actually that's not right either, to be fair, in my view. So yeah, no secrets, but just, a little bit more. And I'm not always good at this. Challenges this every day is being in the moment. I'm getting better, and lockdown has massively helped that for me. It's slowed me down. It's coming back to that thing. I've been forced to slow down, but as Bryn said, you know, whether it's doing, you know, writing an article, doing a podcast, doing an interview, working on a project, reviewing an agreement or whatever, if I go from one to the other, it's different. So, you know, and yeah, we spend a lot of time not on the beach, but at the beach, or we're in an apartment overlooking the beach, and I could sit on the balcony looking at the sea and the sun, and do all the reviews. And right, I get as much pleasure out of that, and I guess, than some of the people that are lying on the beach. What are they doing? What are they thinking about? Their head's still moving. So, you know,
No, that's
a
brilliant.
different way.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I can empathise with both of you really there. Like Brynley, I completely agree with, you know, giving you, some people don't give themselves permission to switch off sometimes, you know, give yourself permission to, yeah, it's okay to watch Netflix sometimes. It's okay to spend time with your family. You don't want to miss it at the end of the day. You'll never get it back. You know, it's only when it pushes too far into procrastination that it becomes an issue, but everyone's level is different from that perspective. And Richard, your approach on being more stoic, basically. The highs are never as good as they're going to be.
I'm going to write that down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I'm very skeptical to celebrate the wins too much, and like you said, the lows are never going to be as low as nothing lasts forever, you know. And even after COVID-19, people think, "Oh, I'm glad we're out of that." I don't mean it in a bad way, but there'll always be something that will get you down later on. You know, it's how we deal with it. I'm not saying that I'm a professional, I know exactly what I'm doing. At the end of the day, it's a constant battle. But I think sharing this with people, sharing people's routines and how they deal with stress is so important, especially these days, especially while people are on lockdown, and especially, you know, mental health becoming such a big thing that people need to open up to more and discuss more and more. So thanks for sharing that, guys. That's been great. Guys, I want to end on that really. It's a nice way to finish off. If for people though who want to get in touch with you and find out more about you, where can they get hold of you guys?
Social media is often a good place to get hold of us. There's not too many other Brynley Littles in the world, so if you just type Brynley Little into your search bar on Facebook, I guess you'll come up with me. For property development related stuff specifically, we run a Facebook group called the House Building Business Community. So if you find me, you'll find that, or search for it directly, and we'll let you into the group. And there's 2,500 people as of the recording of this interview in the group, sharing different insights and experiences. So they're probably the two best on social media. And yeah, if we take any further further conversations, then email address, best one to get me on is Bryn, BRYN, @yourlandpartner.co.uk.
Perfect. That's great. No, guys, thank you very much. I've really appreciated having you guys on. It's been fantastic. Thanks for being on. Cheers.